A 15-year-old Amish boy and his father ventured into the city for the very first time. Having spent their lives on a quiet farm, the sights and sounds of modern civilization left them wide-eyed with amazement. Tall glass buildings, flashing lights, and the constant hum of automobiles. It was a world unlike anything they had ever known. Eventually, they found themselves inside a grand shopping mall, their boots clicking against the polished floors as they wandered around, taking in the strange and wonderful sights. But nothing fascinated them more than a pair of shiny silver doors that seemed to move apart and slide back together again, all on their own. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve. "What is this, father?" The old man squinted at the contraption, stroking his beard. "Son, I've never seen anything like this in my life. I don't know what it is." Just then, a rather large elderly woman in a wheelchair rolled up to the strange doors and pressed a small glowing button. The walls opened with a soft sound, and she wheeled herself into a tiny room inside. The doors slid shut behind her. The father and son watched, fascinated, as a row of numbers above the doors began lighting up one by one. They counted along, 1, 2, 3, 4, until the numbers stopped at the last one. Then, just as mysteriously, the sequence reversed. 4, 3, 2, 1. A moment later, the doors slid open again, and stepping out was not the elderly woman, but a stunning 24-year-old blonde woman. Her hair shone like gold, her dress hugged her figure perfectly, and she walked with the grace of an angel. The father, his mouth slightly agape, didn't blink as he nudged his son and whispered urgently, "Junior, go get your mother." A man was thrilled when his relatives from Mexico came to visit for the very first time. Wanting to give them an authentic American experience, he decided to take them to a football game. Unfortunately, by the time they arrived at the stadium, the only seats left were way up in the nosebleeds, so high up that a massive support column partially blocked their view of the field. The man winced as he looked around at their less-than-ideal vantage point. Feeling embarrassed, he turned to his uncle and apologized. "I'm so sorry, the seats aren't better. We can hardly see the field from here." But his uncle just waved him off with a big smile. "Don't worry about it. I'm just happy to be here." As the game began, the man noticed something unexpected. His uncle wasn't just enjoying himself. He was thrilled. He clapped along with the crowd, cheered loudly, and kept a huge grin on his face the entire time. By the time the game ended, the man couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. "Uncle, I'm so glad you had a good time," he said. "But tell me, why were you so happy we could barely see the game?" His uncle beamed and patted him on the back. "Well," he said, "I was just so touched by how nice everyone is in America. The entire stadium stood up and asked, 'Jose, can you see?'" A large bus rolled up to a roadside eatery, hissing to a stop. The doors swung open and a flood of passengers poured out, chatting excitedly as they made their way inside. They settled into seats, scanning the menu with enthusiasm. As the waitstaff bustled around, the bus driver pulled the manager aside and spoke in a hushed tone. "Sir, I just wanted to give you a heads up," he said. "We're from the mental asylum down the road. I'm taking the inmates out for a little ride, and this stop is part of our outing." The manager's eyebrows shot up, but the driver continued. "When they finish eating, they'll insist on paying with bottle caps, just like they do inside the asylum. Please humor them and accept their payments. I'll settle the actual bill at the end." The manager, though skeptical, nodded. "All right, I suppose I can play along." As the meal progressed, just as the driver had predicted, each passenger finished eating and solemnly placed bottle caps on the table as payment. The manager, maintaining a straight face, accepted them all with a polite nod, suppressing his amusement. Finally, the group finished their meal and filed back onto the bus, chatting happily about their experience. The driver strolled up to the counter and the manager presented the bill. The driver carefully looked it over, nodding in satisfaction. "Excellent. I really appreciate your cooperation. You have no idea how difficult it is to handle these people." The manager gave a small, knowing smile. "No problem at all." The driver reached into his pocket, then looked up. "Now, would you happen to have change for a hubcap?" 3 kids sat on the schoolyard bench, deep in discussion, each determined to prove that their dad was the fastest. Anya leaned forward, eyes shining with excitement. "My dad is the fastest!" she declared. "He's a builder. He can throw a brick off the 5th floor, race down the stairs, and catch it before it even hits the ground." Brad scoffed. "That's nothing. My dad is way faster. He's a professional archer. He can shoot an arrow at a wolf, sprint across the field, and grab the animal before the arrow lands." Anya's jaw dropped. "Wow, that's incredible." They both turned to Tommy, who had been listening with a knowing smirk. "All right, Tommy," Brad said, crossing his arms. "Think your dad is faster than that?" Tommy grinned. "Oh, absolutely. My dad's been working at the DMV for 20 years. He's supposed to finish work at 5 p.m. He paused for effect. "But he's so fast he's home by 1. An old widowed man spent his first night in a nursing home. That evening, a stunning nurse walked in and handed him a Viagra tablet. Confused, the old man asked, "What am I supposed to do with this?" The nurse smiled shyly and replied, "Oh, it's not what you think. While you're sleeping, these tablets stop you from rolling out of bed." A weary bartender wiped his forehead as he rushed from one end of the bar to the other. The place was packed, the orders were piling up, and exhaustion clung to him like a heavy coat. Just then, a bear lumbered in and took a seat at the bar. The bartender, still catching his breath, eventually made his way over. The bear studied him for a moment and said, "You look exhausted." "Yeah." The bartender sighed. "It's been a rough day. What are you drinking?" The bear nodded and replied, "I'll have a glass of—" He paused and waited and waited. The bartender, barely holding on to his patience, leaned in. "Scotch," the bear finally finished. The bartender rubbed his temples. "Why the long pause?" The bear lifted his massive front paws, wiggled his claws, and smirked. "Don't you mean big paws?" The bartender sighed. "Yeah, sorry. Like I said, it's been a rough day." In the game room of a psychiatric hospital, Jim and Neil sat across from each other, deeply engrossed in a game of checkers. As Neil made his move, Jim let out a deep sigh. "Man, you won't believe the dream I had last night," Jim said, shaking his head. "I was in New York, got on a train to Boston, fell asleep and woke up in Chicago." Neil chuckled. "That's rough." "And it kept happening," Jim continued. "Chicago to Boston, fell asleep, woke up in New York again, back and forth all night long. I was exhausted when I woke up," Neil laughed. "That's nothing. I had an amazing dream last night." Jim leaned in, intrigued. "Oh yeah, what happened?" "I met a gorgeous, famous woman." Jim's eyes widened. "Who?" "Beyonce," Neil said, grinning. "She knocked on my door, soaking wet from the rain, and said, 'Can I come in to warm up?'" Jim's jaw dropped. "No way." "What did you say?" Neil smirked. "What do you think I said? Of course, let's have some fun." So she comes in, takes off her clothes, jumps in the shower, and then comes out wrapped in a towel, ready to cuddle up with me on the couch. Jim exhaled in awe. "Wow, what a dream." Wait, that's not all," Neil added. "Just as we're getting comfortable, there's another knock at the door. I open it, and guess who's standing there, soaking wet from the rain?" Jim was practically bouncing in his seat. Who?" "Scarlett Johansson," Neil exclaimed. "She asks if she can come in too. Of course, I say yes." She steps inside, takes a shower, and joins us on the couch. And the whole night, I'm just sitting there thinking, what the heck am I going to do with both of them? Jim threw his hands up in frustration. "What kind of friend are you? You had two beautiful, famous women, and you didn't even call me? Isn't one enough for you?" Neil suddenly looked annoyed. "You think I didn't try? I called you all night, but you? New York to Chicago, Chicago to New York, New York to Chicago." A newly divorced woman was strolling along the beach, frustrated over how horribly the divorce settlement had turned out for her. As she walked, she spotted an old lamp half buried in the sand. With nothing to lose, she picked it up and gave it a rub. To her surprise, a genie appeared. Sensing her frustration, the genie let her vent before saying, "All right, I'll grant you 3 wishes, but be warned, I'm not a fan of divorce. Whatever you wish for, your ex-husband will receive 10 times more." She winced, but decided to go ahead. "Fine, I wish for $1 billion. Poof." Instantly, mountains of crisp banknotes surrounded her. Before she could celebrate, the genie smirked. "Just so you know, your ex-husband now has $10 billion. Her smile faded, but she took a deep breath and continued. "I wish for a 25,000 square foot mansion on this beach." Poof! A stunning modern mansion appeared right in front of her. She beamed until the genie pointed down the shore, where 10 identical, breathtaking mansions stood. Now, visibly fuming, she clenched her fists and took a moment to think. Then a slow smile crept across her face. "For my final wish, I want to give birth to twins." James sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring down at his bare feet with a look of deep concern. His heart pounded as he ran a hand through his hair. "How do I tell her?" he thought. "For months, I've managed to hide it. Fresh socks, extra deodorant, strategic foot placement. But now, there's no escape. Sooner or later, she's going to realize my feet smell like something out of a horror movie." Meanwhile, in the bedroom, Emma sat on the bed, clutching a pillow to her chest, her own worries swirling in her mind. "How do I tell him?" she fretted. "I've done everything, chewing gum, mints, even breathing away from him when we kissed. But we're married now. There's no avoiding it. He's going to wake up one morning, turn to kiss me, and pass out from the fumes." Both sat in silence, battling their inner turmoil, until finally, James took a deep breath. Enough was enough. He had to come clean. With newfound determination, he walked into the bedroom, climbed onto the bed, and wrapped his arms around Emma. Their faces were inches apart as he gazed into her eyes. "Darling," he said softly, "I have a confession to make." Emma exhaled, relieved. "So do I, love." James hesitated, his nerves spiking. But before he could say another word, Emma wrinkled her nose slightly and blurted, "Don't tell me you've eaten my socks."